Bernard Tobin here for Real Agriculture, joined today by Barry Sent of GFO. Welcome, Barry.
Well, thank you, and thank you for coming out today.
Hey, now we're standing outside SGS Laboratories. Basically, you guys have just announced a new grain analytical testing laboratory, first of its kind in Ontario. Tell us why grain farmers invest in a lab like this.
Well, I think it's a value add that we can provide to our producers. We know that the market is getting more demanding and less demanding, and this is going to add value to the production of wheat and the sale to our customers. Processors to begin with, we're going to carry out a harvest survey for wheat, one that we've done for a good number of years, but had it done in the West. With that, it served the purpose, but we wanted to move a step closer to having that resource in Guelph and in Ontario. With that, the people that are running the lab, the ones that know it very well, the results of that can go out and talk to our customers about those results. So it's a value add for our farmer members. We're going to start on wheat and the wheat sampling or harvest survey that we have been doing for a good number of years. The first year it'll be done here. But then we're going to look at what other commodities this lab can support, whether that's soybeans or corn or barley or oats. So this is just the beginning.
Right. And you mentioned end users. Like, everybody wants to know what's in the product, whether it's millers or bakers. How does it work for them? What's the value there?
Well, as far as the harvest survey, the first thing we're going to be doing is processors do not like surprises. And we know that through growing condition or even through that of harvest conditions, the quality of wheat can change. And we need to let processors know as soon as we can what they can expect when it's coming through their flour mill, for example. So that'll be the first thing that we're putting our emphasis to. From our side of the equation, because this is a partnership between GFO and SGS, the other thing is what we can be doing in either the basic research on behalf of the industry or with that of applied research. So, access by the researchers, by the wheat breeders, as far as putting wheat through this, and making sure that we're breeding a trait that our customers want.
And I guess a final question, Barry, is we've got 1 million acres of wheat out there. It's going to need marketing help. It's going to need as much information as possible, and that's probably where this sits as well, right?
Absolutely. We got now the weather might have an effect on how big that volume is, but we still know we got a big volume of wheat to market. Any value add that we can provide along with that adds to the value of that wheat itself. You just don't want to go out there with no information. It's like any other commodity or other piece of electronics. It's not only the cost and the electronic itself, it's what information you can supply with that. And that's no different than the commodities that we grow, and in this case, wheat.
Okay, we're inside the lab now with Paolo Santangelo. And Paolo, give us a little tour. Show us what's inside the lab.
Yes, sure. So welcome to the Grains Analytical Testing Laboratory. This is where we would immediately take the sample of wheat, prepare it for grinding, and begin milling it here on our Buehler lab mill, where we would turn that wheat into flour and separate the bran from the endosperm and work with the flour with all the other tests that we have in our lab. So right here we have a rotap, which is able to give a particle size distribution of the flour that we just finished milling. And here is where we can grind our wheat and use the wheat sample for other tests that we are able to perform out in the lab as well. Over here we have our bake station. We have the ability to take the samples of flour that we just milled or submitted samples that we receive from industry, mix it here, proceed that sample over to our sheeter, and then mold our pieces for the pan, and take those pans and bring them over to our fermentation cabinet for proofing and then further baking. So this is our fermentation cabinet. This is where we're proofing our product, allowing the dough to rise to a specific size or after a specific amount of time, proceed it over to our oven and proceed to bake it there. Here is where we're able to see how different types of flour perform. Some give more, some give less volume, some give a different crumb, some give different colors for that matter. Over here we have our glutamatic. We're able to separate the gluten that's formed after mixing flour and water together from the starchy material and measure our dry gluten, our wet gluten, and our gluten index. This is a pretty important piece of information for those who are very keen on knowing that as it relates to the products that they're manufacturing. We also have some enzymatic activity being measured here in our millograph. It measures not only the enzyme activity, but also how the starch behaves after temperatures increase, and eventually the alpha amylase enzymes break down that starch. So this is something that's prevalent primarily in our soft wheat flours, and not as much on our hard wheats, but still can be an important aspect of information to know. We have our 1,000 kernel counter. This is what we use to weigh out what 1,000 kernels weighs, and where we can compare these results to other wheat samples. We have our farinograph. Here, this is something that mimics what a mixer would have at the bakery. So we got a bowl, we got two mixers, we have flour and water added together, and all of a sudden we start to measure the properties of mixing as time goes on. And we want to see how long it takes to develop a dough, and we also want to see exactly how long it would take for that dough to break down after some time. Different flours behave differently. Some have longer stabilities as far as strength goes, and some have very short ones, if you want to compare soft wheat and hard wheat, for example. And on this side over here, we have our alveograph. This alveograph is something that's used a lot in our hard wheat and durum industries. It's something that measures the elasticity and extensibility properties of flour. It has the ability to push air through a dough piece, blow a bubble, and it measures how big the bubble gets. Not really, but not as just to give an example, and also measures how much pressure it would take for it to eventually break. And finally, over here we have our extensograph. This is something that is able to measure how extensible a dough is after some time's been given to the dough for it to rest. It uses this hook to grab a piece of the dough that's placed here on the blue paddles, and as the hook picks up the dough, it pulls it down, stretches it, continues to stretch it. It is measuring the amount of resistance that's applied to that dough, and also how far down the hook goes before the dough snaps. So again, a measure of dough strength and also extensibility. For example, the work input in a dough at mixing with the farinograph resistance and dough strength to the gluten index, you can say all of those can give you an indication of gluten strength and dough strength. But even though that's the case, it's typically the differences between one sample and another where that all plays a value. And some different, tortillas versus bread products, they're all looking for different parameters, and it's providing that information to those industries as to what it is that wheat or that flour is actually giving them, and how it correlates to either a good product or a bad product where there's a lot of value. So this is something that we're looking to be able to be a part of, is contributing that type of information in partnership with either bakeries or millers or even farmers as to what it is that we're looking for and what it is that our end users are looking for. So again, just a little taste of what it is that we can do. We hope to be able to grow our abilities further in the future and contribute more information as far as science goes to accompany the art of baking and making products.